G'day guys, Wearman here. Welcome back to the workshop. So I've kind of gone off track in a major way as far as I'm concerned. I don't know if you guys are like enjoying this or not, but I had meant to structure things a bit better and do it, and it's part of the reason why it took me so long to get it done in the first place was because I wanted to try and set it out properly, and I've basically failed. So I thought, well, stuff it. Let's just do what we do. But what I was trying to get was like an idea of different parts. So if you remember, I ran through the parts of a scenario, right? So force building, deployment, all that sort of stuff. And what I was trying to do is end up with some sort of reasonably modular way of saying, okay, here's a whole bunch of different ways to build forces, right? Then you guys can pick which one you want to do for your scenario. And here's a whole bunch of different ways to deploy forces, and you guys can pick which one you want to do for your scenario. And I kind of got away from that with a bunch of different ideas and things. So I'm going to try and get back a bit of that by doing what I'm going to call the notebook series. So what I'm going to do is I've got a blank page in a notebook. I've written the subject that I want to talk about at the top. I'm going to go through, I'm going to make some notes as I go through talking about some ideas. I haven't scripted this. I'm just going off the stuff that I've been thinking about, and I'll write a bunch of stuff down and we'll see what ends up on there. And if this one is interesting for you and there's a particular part that you want to see more of, then you can mention it in a comment, or if you like this one, then you can just go through and put a like down or whatever it is, right? The first one I want to do is kaiju, because I did mention this to Bregel and I said, that's cool. I like that idea and I've been thinking about it a lot, but I haven't gotten around to actually doing it. Let's talk kaiju and how I would think of doing them in BattleTech, because I have actually thought about this. I'm gonna say kaiju. It means basically anything from fairly largish movie monsters, probably not like dinosaur level, because I think they're covered somewhere in BattleTech rules. I'm not 100% sure, but I think there's some large animal stuff covered there somewhere. I mean, like big ones that would flatten an atlas with 1 foot, sort of thing, Godzilla size. We're talking huge. So I'm just going to say kaiju and cover everything we do. So if you're wondering, that's why we're using it. All of the big monster movies that I've seen, especially the ones that involve actual kaiju, like Japanese monsters, they tend to have some sort of category scale. There'll be a class F, or there'll be a category 2, or something like that, right? They usually have some sort of scaling system for it. And what I would do if you're going to use some sort of scaling system to say, okay, so this one is worse than this one, and so this is a class 1 and this is a class 4, right? And that will actually come in handy if you do that with a number and do it increasing in magnitude. Okay, so if you do that, then you can use that to scale things like biological weaponry, armor levels, size, all sorts of things, right? You can use that number as a multiplier for different things, and you'll probably see that if I ever get around to talking about weapons. So a scaling system, and I'd go with cats and go like 1 all the way up to N, right? So you can have little tiny hatchling things. And yes, I think it was Iron Ghost, somebody put down that urban mechs would be like kaiju hatchlings, and I like that. You could do that. That would be funny. But I would definitely have some sort of scaling system. Now, you could do this as like just a basic thing, right? The basic thing would just be put a big monster model, something to represent a big monster, on the board, and say, okay, you have to try and bring that monster down. Give it a number of hit points, give it an amount of like attacks, or something like that. Figure out something for it to do, and all they have to do is bring it down. Or you could say, well, it's so big that you can't bring it down. You're not ever going to be able to bring it down. And then you can turn it into something like either a delay action, so every time you hit it for a certain amount of points, it'll stop and turn towards you instead of moving towards the other side of the board. And on the other side of the board is like a big city full of people, and you have to delay it for a certain number of turns before it gets to that side in order to evacuate the city completely, sort of thing. Or you could even have it like a hunting mission, So damaging it by a certain amount every turn before it gets off the board will mean that it's bleeding for X number of turns, and that means you can track it for X number of turns. That sort of thing, you know. The basic one would just be a big monster, give it some hit points, and let people shoot it until it drops, right? Moving it into more of a regular feature in things. So you could have like a world that they found in some weird nebula or something somewhere that has these things like, and you come across a hatchling nest and there's a bunch of eggs there, and if nobody starts shooting the eggs, then within X number of turns they start hatching. Now, what I'm looking at here is just basically like mechanics type things. So the scenario you can have be just about anything, right? Like I say, you could have it where they come to a world and find a hatchling nest, and the hatchlings come out and they start scattering. And any you don't bring down, like the games master could roll for each one and give them some sort of ability or something, and each one you don't bring down disappears into the wilderness, right? And the number of turns it takes you to find them, multiplied by their category or something like that, means they evolve or they get bigger, and then if they're big enough they can breed, and if you breed two with the right things together you get something weird. You can do all sorts of things, but just basic mechanics. Scaling system is one thing. That category number you can use to like multiply things out. I'd make them big, right? They need to be really, really big, right? Like I say, they need to be able to squash stuff. I reckon like Godzilla stepping on an atlas, he would destroy an atlas stepping on it. I think scale-wise, I think he's capable of doing that. You want it at the bare minimum that they will heavily damage you, right? But you also want that if you make them big enough to step on a mech, you want it so that you have some way to avoid that. Now, the obvious way to avoid it is not stand next to the bloody thing, but you know, you want a piloting skill check, or if you've got movement points left, then when you make that movement check, maybe you can get some sort of bonus on it or something. I don't know, but some sort of piloting skill roll or something that lets you dodge out of the way of that potentially destructive, game-ending stomp. I would give pretty much all of them some sort of physical attack. And because they're big, you make that physical attack reasonably short range, but very devastating, right? So Godzilla Stomp would be the main one that I'm thinking of. So the Stomp would be like in adjacent hex and a PSR to dodge or death, right? And you could give them a chance to eject or something like that. You could have like a slap or a claw attack or something like that. So a claw attack would do in adjacent hexes again, and you could make that do their category times 10 in like groups of 10, right? And have it be like a talon type thing. So they come down and they slash through, and it's their category number. So a cat 4 would do 40 points of damage split into 4 groups of 10, right? So you want these to be devastating. You could have stuff with like a tail, or you could have like a big blob thing with like tentacles and stuff. You could have a big Cthulhu type thing, or a mutation with like a tentacle arm or something. So you could have some sort of gripping attack and either have it bring you in, so have it go out further. So we'll call that a grip or tentacle attack, and have that go out further. So maybe 3 hex max. Give it a minor amount of damage for the initial impact, but have the point being that you have to make some sort of PSR to not have like your arms pinned. And you could have a modifier based on the category, right? So you could have a modifier of say 4 or 5, or you could just start with say -1 plus their category number. So a cat 1 would have a +0, cat 2 would have a +1, etc., etc., etc. And like a hatchling trying to do this would have, well, actually no, you want it to go down, don't you? So you could have like modifier of +5, say, minus your category number, right? And have it work that way. So a cat 5 would get a +0. And then the grip thing means that somebody has to shoot that specific tentacle to get you free or something like that, right? And it could do crush damage to a certain amount on a standard location every turn or every 2 turns or something like that. Or you could just have it grip it, immobilize it, and then continue on. So it'll grip one and hold them, and then it'll try and hurt the others. And if it's got multiple tentacles, it'll try and grip another one, and it'll hold that one. And once all its tentacles are free, it'll bring one up for a bite or something like that, right? So you have to try and free your teammates before something bad happens to them. Other stuff would be like a bite or something like that, but you'd have to tailor it to your particular monster. The other thing was like actual physical defenses. I'm thinking something like armor and or a biological type regen thing. Now you could set these up as like a super heavy or a bipedal, if you do a bipedal super heavy and just have like hit points per location or something. Even Godzilla had 2 legs and 2 technically hands. So you could set Godzilla up that way. The armor that's on a BattleTech record sheet is inadequate for this sort of thing, so you'd have to put some sort of system in place for how you mark armor off as like hit points and things. Biological armor you could use. There are 2 types of armor in actual BattleTech. You have reflective armor that helps you against energy weapons but is bad against ballistic weapons, and you have reactive armor that is good against ballistic weapons but bad against energy weapons, right? So you could give these monsters something like that, right? And say, okay, so your category times 2 is the amount that you divide the damage by, something like that. So we'll call it reactive, and there's no reason you can't give them a stealth armor type thing as well, to indicate some sort of natural camouflage type thing. And you could have the modifiers on that based on their category as well, if you wanted to. And then you could have a regen. So if you have regen, you could make it specific locations, or you could just generally have regeneration. So it will put a certain number of armor bubbles back on its sheet per round, per turn, per movement point, per whatever, right? You can have that based on anything. And you can also multiply that out by their categories. So their size indicates how well they regenerate. As far as attacks go, I had a lot of ideas. I mean, you've all seen, hopefully, Godzilla, the beam thing that he shoots out of his mouth, laser breath. I'm going to call that laser breath. He's got that like thing. And you could have that be like an area effect. You could have it be like an artillery shot. So he shoots out kind of like a ball of energy, like a big PPC ball, but like huge. Have it affect an entire area, have it hit the thing that he was shooting at with, 20 or 30 points of damage, and then spread out from there. Or you could have it travel along a line, and when it hits something, it loses like X amount of its damage and then carries on. Or you could have it be like a big splash thing. So he goes, wah, at this thing, he hits a mech, and from that mech it expands out, right? And if it doesn't hit anything, it just carries along in a straight line until it does hit something. And then, depending on how far it goes, is how far it spreads out at the minute. So closer up, it'll spread further. Further away, it spreads less, right? And again, base damage on your category. You see that, I think that category system is, if you're going to put these in like a lot, then that is probably one of the things that you want to try and get right first, because you can use that to adjust a lot of other stuff. What was the other thing I was thinking? Oh, you know how you get porcupine quills, right? I don't know if any of you have ever seen Nightbreed. It's a movie based on it's not Clive Barker. Or was it Clive Barker? It's based on Cabal. Or is Cabal based on Nightbreed? I can't remember. But in the movie, there was one of the young lady monsters was like a half human, half porcupine type thing. And she had the ability to throw her quills backwards. But what I was thinking is, I mean, one of the things that you would want to do with this is get behind it because it's so slow. So maybe you could give it some sort of like natural projectile weapon, like a porcupine quill or something like that, that'll do like X amount of damage. So it's category times 10 to a certain point, or it's category times 5 to a certain location. You could have it be an automatic shot if someone moves into the back, spines or quills or whatever you want to call them. Cat times 5 damage. I don't know. You'd have to figure that out. But that would be one that I would think would be kind of cool. And like I say, you could mix and match these amongst, like if you have like hatchlings that come out of a thing and they all run off into the forest, and you could do this without, like, just start it as a thing without anybody knowing that they even exist, and just go, okay, so I've got these, I'm going to roll for their abilities, and then we'll see if they get abilities as they grow up, right? And then by the time that your group, your players, have figured out what they're going to do and organised themselves and gotten themselves there, your creatures have evolved to a certain point where they have these abilities, and you can just go, well, there they are, you guys figure it out, sort of thing, you know? I think having them be that big is important, but you could have some smaller, like, monster-type things, but you would have to, like, work that into how you're going to do it, how you want to have them move. Do you want them to be really fast? If you want them to be really fast, you don't want them to be too big. So you could have category ones like the crocodile in Rampage, the movie, which was, yeah, I used to love that game, and they kind of messed it up. But, 30-foot killer wolf, what's not to love? But yeah, you could have it like Rampage size monsters. They're not really squashing atlases and things, but they are pretty big, right? And they'd be a lot faster than, say, a category 5 or 6, which would be whereabout I would think Godzilla would be, right? And I reckon he would be squashing. If you are silly enough to stand next to him, then there should be a solid chance for you to end up dead, right? Just squashed, just completely squashed. And you could have a thing where, like, they've got a rear section. I mean, he's got a tail, and there's no reason you can't have them make more than one physical attack per turn. So a really big one could use its tail to literally swat a unit that's in its rear arc and fling it across the map, sort of thing. That would be kind of cool, like a tail strike. So to do damage, you could mute the damage a little bit and just have it like cat times 5 or cat times 4 or something like that. Have it distributed in 5-point groups, or even in 10-point groups if you felt like it. And then have it push or hurl, right? You could have it be literally like picked up and thrown. So you're not hitting hexes that are in between you and your landing area, but you are taking impact damage at the area where you land. And there is fall damage in BattleTech standard rules. You could have it either flung X hexes, where X is probably just your category, right? Or your category times 2, or your category times like plus 50% or something, right? So one would be just 2 hexes, or it'd just be 1 hex, and 2 would be 3 hexes, and blah, 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 etc. Or you could have it actually like pushed, and you'd have to make like, no, I don't think you'd be able to stay upright. You could allow a modified PSR for being able to stay upright, but I would modify it by the amount of damage you've just taken, because if we do it cat times 5, and a cat 3 or 4 hits you, if a cat 4 hits you with its tail, that is 20 points of damage, which gives you an extra +1, and you have to roll to fall over even if it doesn't fling you. So, if it flings you in the air, you're definitely falling down, and you're taking damage for the number of levels you fall. If it pushes you, then you've got a very, 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 very slim chance of being able to stay upright, unless you're a large mech, so you could base the modifier on the size of the mech, and you could also base it on the size of the monster. But it would be a PSR heavily modified. More attacks, there's got to be more attacks. I mean, you could give them all sorts of attacks, couldn't you, technically? I mean, you can have them, I can't remember what the movie was, but there was like a big, almost like a frog type thing that was spitting big globs of acid. You could have it be something like that, so it'll be like a projectile, like I was saying with the laser breath, the beam. You could have it be an actual projectile. You could have a flamethrower equivalent, easy enough, but it would be an amped up flamethrower. So you could take the standard rules for a flamethrower, the increase in heat and the increase in damage, like doing damage. You could combine the two and then modify it by the category size. So a Cat 5 might do something like 10 points of damage and 15 points of heat, like the maximum points of heat or something. You might even want to suspend the rule that means that you can't take more than 15 points of heat from a particular point, external source, because this is hot breath, right? But the acid ball could like arc, fall down, splash in like that hex and the adjacent hexes. The initial impact gets a small amount of damage, but then takes damage over time. So you could mark it with some sort of token or something like that to say it's been acidified and just start stripping armor off it. And it could be as bad as Alien's acid blood, which is eating through ceramic armor and ferroceramic armor and whatever it was that they had there in seconds. Or you could have it be something slower and a bit more mild, I guess it would be the word. You could have it last a certain number of turns. You could have it just continue on until it's in some way neutralized. And you could say, well, if you immerse yourself in water, then the acid is neutralized, sort of thing. I don't know, maybe, right? You could do all sorts of things with that sort of thing. You could have an actual flamethrower, and there's no reason you couldn't make electric attack. I think part of some of the beam things that some of the actual kaiju, like the Japanese monster guys, have is like an electric, like a lightning shot. So you could have sort of a taser effect if you were feeling particularly nasty, and you could have a PSR modified to see if you can keep your mech on, or you could just have a roll and modify it by the category number to see if the mech shuts down. That would be kind of funky. So call that a lightning / taser attack. I could probably come up with some more, but see how everybody likes that. If any of those things strike your fancy, if any of them give you any ideas, let me know. If you want me to explore any of them more, or if you actually like this and you've got a subject that you want a notebook series one done on, then please feel free to chuck a comment down or come on to the lives and give us a yell on there. I'm going to go on from this. I'll go on to some more sensible topics like force building and deployment options and things like that. And then we'll see what the sort of response is to the notebook series, and maybe I'll carry on and find some others to do. That was notebook session number 1. I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope you're still listening to these. Again, thanks very much for the guys that are watching, listening. Shout out to BattleTech Badly. Just reread a couple of comments and I saw you were in there. I love the name, dude. Well done. Shout out to Breggle if you're still teaching your young lad how to play. The two of you are actually teaching your kids how to play, so that's pretty cool. Just make sure they're enjoying themselves first. To everybody that's listening, thank you very much. Hopefully you're subscribed and you're following these along. Let me know if there's anything particularly you want to hear. And I think that's basically it. I've had way too much caffeine this morning because I'm trying to do housework. I'm going to go on with my day. You guys stay groovy, and I'll catch you in the next one.